starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur, switching from one job to another, doing a blog, creating a whole little business, when it's not something you've never done before, there are going to be lots of things outside your comfort zone. And I think it's essential to know why you're there, because that's like a well you can go to when the going gets tough, so to speak, that you can sort of say, you know what, this is why I'm doing this.
That was Andy Molinsky, and this is episode number 118 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, how are you doing? I am Marley. I'm with the blog Namely Marley, and I am your host. And this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. So you might ask the question, what are we doing here? Well, every week I love to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Before we get started, I just want to say, can you believe it's February 1? I don't know. It seems like January went by way too fast. I don't know. But then again, there are parts of it I wish could have lasted just a little bit longer, like maybe January 1 through the 19th, if you get my drift. But I promise we will not get into politics because there's just so much of that going on. And I was thinking we could just look at this podcast as a nice little break from all of that, don't you think? Besides, you want to know something? I've kind of decided one way to resist everything that's going on right now is to be my absolute best at the things that I do and feel passionate about. So I don't feel good when I'm just sitting around stewing all the time, which, by the way, I have had a few moments like that for sure. But I don't know, I just feel like I have to create a positive mindset. And so one way to do that for me is to get inspired about creating my business in a way that just, motivates me and feels like it's going to make a difference in this world. And I'm constantly learning new ideas to tweak things one way or another to make things better. For example, we could call this maybe a tip for the day because my business coach, I was talking with her recently and she suggested that I create some rules around my mailbox. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I get so overwhelmed by my email box. And I told her that. And this is, kind of what we came out of that session with. There's a couple of things that I'm doing differently now as a result of feeling overwhelmed and actually missing an important email that came through. I got to it. I was just a little bit late and that really got my attention. Like, okay, I don't want that to continue anymore. So here are the two things that I'm really doing. And I probably could say three, but let's stick with these two. First of all, she suggested that you can actually turn your email box off. I don't know if you know this or not, but yes, you can turn it off and only open it at certain predetermined times so that you are the person that's in control of when you're opening your email. It's purposeful, it's timed, and it's not then a distraction anymore. So once you turn your mailbox off, you don't have those little alerts at the bottom. Like mine right now has a little red circle that tells me exactly how many emails I have waiting for me at this moment. It takes a certain amount of self-control not to go there. I don't know why. It's like, I don't know, there's something there that I need to read, but oftentimes when I go there, it's just junk mail. And so that's the second thing that she and I talked about is I created a bunch of rules. I have a MacBook Pro, and so it has iMail, and iMail has rules that you can designate. So I just basically spent about 20 minutes, I would guess, and created a bunch of new mailboxes and created rules for those things. Because there are some emails that I get that I just feel like I'm supporting a cause by being a part of their newsletter, and I don't want to unsubscribe. Some of them I just decided to unsubscribe from a few, but there are several that I really felt like I wanted to be the supportive person and be a part of it. And I can go to that mailbox from time to time, again, in a purposeful way based on my agenda, not based on them kind of showing up in my email box and my inbox in particular. So the emails are there. They're just in separate mailboxes, and I can go whenever I want and look in those mailboxes and take a look. And so I feel like those two things have really helped me. It's like it's just another example of ways that you can kind of tweak your business to make you feel a little bit better. I know that I feel more inspired. It's funny how much a drag that my email box was for me, and now I feel much better about it. So I highly recommend just going in there and making some changes like that for yourself. The third thing, I guess, what I was going to say would be that you could just unsubscribe from a bunch of things too. So those are three options for you. And look at that as kind of my tip for the day. Okay. Now let's move on to today's guest. I invited Andy Molinsky to be my guest on the show today because he's the author of a recently released book called Reach. He also previously wrote a book called Global Dexterity. He is a professor of organizational behavior at Brandeis University, and he specializes in behavior change and cross-cultural interaction in business settings. And so all of that transcribes down into he's an expert in change. And I don't know if you know this, but in my previous corporate job, we actually had teams that would go out into primary care practices across the country and help facilitate change. And one thing that we learned is that this is not rocket science, but change is not easy. And not just because some of the things that we were teaching them was technology. Actually, the technology was not the hard part. The hard part was actually getting people motivated and excited about the change and really addressing the culture that was going on in the office that kind of prevented that from happening. So you'd kind of think that we wouldn't have to deal with these kinds of problems, right? Because, most of us are these one-person offices. But here's the thing. We all wear many hats, right? So we're doing multiple roles. We also probably still have other people that we're working with, like web developers, or maybe you might have a graphic designer that does some things for you. Anyway, all of those things cause us to interact with other people, cause us to be honestly interacting with ourselves because, as we have said before, Kara and I have talked about this on the podcast, sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. And I feel like if we don't have a nice, inspiring, personal culture of growth and expansion, then we might be setting ourselves up to fail. And so I just feel like, there could be some ways that you can apply this book to your own work that you're doing. For example, have you ever thought about ways you might want to expand beyond just the four walls of the office that you're working from? Have you ever thought about you might want to speak at a food blogging conference, or maybe you might want to create a course for your audience, or maybe you're thinking about hiring a virtual assistant. All of these things require some reach on your part. You have to step beyond, maybe you're really nice and comfortable where you're at, but at the same time, you have these goals to move forward. So you just have to kind of constantly be finding ways to push yourself and push beyond that comfort zone. And that's what Andy is an expert in. So that's why I felt like his book and the discussion with him would be a really good tool for all of us to have. I know that I read his book. I found it very inspirational. I'm definitely, going to put that on my reading list of books that I think food bloggers should be reading. So according to Dr. Molinsky, you can develop the understanding and the skills to help blast through your comfort zones. And that's not always as easy as it sounds because the word comfort in there is like, I don't know. I like to think as comfort like gravity. It just really kind of pulls us in. Anyway, I think you're going to love today's discussion. I know that I really enjoyed it. I took a lot of notes from today's episode. So if you want to read more, just head over to choppedpodcast.com where you can see the show notes page. You can also find the link to Dr. Molinsky's book and some other resources that we talk about in today's show. Okay, you all, let's get straight to it. Here is the feature interview with Dr. Andy Molinsky. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Dr. Andy Molinsky. He's author of the recent book Reach and a previous book called Global Dexterity. He is professor of organizational behavior at Brandeis University's International Business School. He's specializing in behavior change and cross-cultural interaction in business settings. Andy, welcome to the Chopped Podcast.
I am very happy to be here, Marley. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to have you here too. I am really excited about your book and I'm really looking forward to talking with you about it. I think there's a lot of great parallels to what we're doing in the food blogging world. But first, I was hoping you could go into a little bit about, what got you started. Or obviously, at some point in your life, you felt intrigued by the topic of change, whether it's personal or corporate. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about what got you into that.
Yeah. So the book is about acting outside your comfort zone. It's
Yeah.
those sort of everyday acts of courage to, pitch and promote yourself, to make small talk, to sell stuff when you're not much of a salesperson, to deliver bad news, all those types of things. And I think what got me into it, frankly, was my own experience. I was the person who never spoke in college. Sat in the back of the room. Had that heart beating as I was considering saying something and just kind of didn't raise the hand. I'd sign up for it, but then not go to networking events. I don't know. When early in my career, when I got asked by companies to give speeches, and I would sort of decline it because I wasn't sure what I had to offer. So lots has changed in the last 15 years or so, but I've struggled with these things. I have students who struggle with them, and so I wanted to write a book that was based on research, but is super user friendly and written for a general public. And so that's what inspired me.
Ah, that sounds very inspiring too. I love those topics as well. And I know that this is going to be an exciting topic for the Chopped audience. But I also wanted to ask you one other question. And since we are mostly dealing with food bloggers, do you also have an interest in food?
Yes, I do.
Oh, that's good.
I love to cook.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of the Food Network. I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing for your
I
audience. Is
think
that a
it's
good
good.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Food Network. I'm a Top Chef junkie. I don't know what else.
Uh,
I guess
we're going to do well, Andy. This is going to be good.
my kids. I have two kids. I have a 10 and 12-year-old who are hugely into food. So yes, I'm very interested in food.
Okay, good. Now that we've got that out of the way, now we can really get on to the important stuff. So I love your book, Reach. It's so I think I know it may sound strange to have this be a topic for food bloggers, but there's a lot of things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis that just, whether it's we've hired a virtual assistant and they're not doing things right, and we've got to explain to them, I think it can be difficult, for solo entrepreneur or business owners to have those kind of tough conversations, put yourself out there, all of that stuff. But you really talk about the comfort zone, and I'm very intrigued by that because I feel like sometimes we seek comfort zones like gravity. It's just like we're drawn to it, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's funny. I actually talk with in my book, I have stories and examples across
Yes, a lot.
professions. So I've,
Yeah.
as you read, I have executives and managers and so on. I have entrepreneurs. I have small business owners. I've got priests. I've got rabbis. I have a goat farmer in there. Uh, I don't have any food bloggers, and you know what?
Ah,
If I had met you earlier, I might have
yes.
had a food blogger.
Next
But
book.
you know what? I find in all what I found is in my research, that the stories, the context, and so on are all different, but the challenges, they're
Yeah.
all so similar. They're all
Right.
so similar, the challenges that people have in stepping outside their comfort zone.
What I'm really intrigued by though is like how much the comfort zone is applicable not just to us as in self improvement or professionally, but have you ever heard of this? His name is Wim Hof.
No.
He's called the Iceman, and he talks about how it's important to expose ourselves to cold. And he talks about comfort too. Like he's saying, like exposing yourself to cold increases your metabolism and increases your immune system. So it's like I don't know. I was just laughing as I was reading your book, like how much, like even just physically, we're drawn to comfort, and sometimes we really need to push ourselves beyond that.
That's interesting.
Isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, that is funny. Is that why people go into those like super cold baths and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's interesting.
There's
Yeah.
actual psychological and physiological benefits to them. But that's like I say, I was reading your book and I was so surprised by this idea of like, even just professionally, like you were talking about being afraid of speaking might hold us from volunteering to present at a conference that's coming up that maybe we really want to do that, but we're so afraid of doing something like that. And that we're so drawn to this comfort zone. It really does kind of hold us back a lot.
Yeah, so in the book I talk about all the different avoidance strategies
Yeah.
that I found, and it's I'll bet some of your listeners probably have done these things. That you've someone offers you an opportunity to I don't know to do something, and you say no, I don't think now's the time. Now's not the right time, or something. I need to. My site's got to get better. I got to perfect what I'm doing or whatever. And in some ways there's a grain of truth to that, but in other ways that might absolutely be a rationalization, and the real issue is that you're actually afraid to do it. We all avoid. We're really good at avoiding because who wouldn't want to avoid something that's uncomfortable? If you think about like say you're afraid of snakes, and you avoid the snake because you're afraid of the snake, but the next time that snake comes, you're not going to be more comfortable, you'll be less comfortable, and it goes on and on and on. And replace the snake with something, insert whatever situation it happens to be for you, whether it's delivering bad news, being assertive, pitching and promoting yourself or your business, having that tough conversation, negotiations, whatever it might be. The more you avoid it, the harder it's going to be.
I love that. And so, a great example for what we do in our industry may be like, what if I wanted to hire a virtual assistant to help, but I'm already like, did you ever watch that Coke? I think it was a Coke commercial where the couple, they're in the elevator together and they're strangers, but they're both imagining like, oh, they're attracted to each other. And then there's like this whole scenario of how they have a great time together and then they break up one day. And so then they neither one end up talking to each other. And it's like, I think sometimes I feel that way about the idea of hiring a virtual assistant. Like I already know this person is going to do something I don't like. And so that means I'm going to have to tell them, you got to do that over. And it just feels so uncomfortable. I'll just do it myself.
Exactly. You avoid
Yes.
it's a difficult conversation. You avoid it, and then you
Yep.
do it yourself, and then you feel that you're overburdened, and then
Yep.
it continues, and
Resentful.
at some point it just increases your stress and
Yep.
so on. And so the book that's just one example, and the book is about, first of all, helping us understand how and why we're avoiding. It's also about trying to understand what's behind your avoidance, what are the reasons that you're afraid, and then of course giving you the tools to be able to actually go off and do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I like all that part. I was also just going to ask you a little bit about some of those avoidance things can be very subtle, like things like likability you talk about. And I think that can be really true. I don't know, I am being a little sexist against the females at this point, but I do think there's some research that shows that women are a little more concerned with likability, and whether that's something that we've been socialized about, or if it's just something that's different about women. I do feel like, there is that tendency to want to be liked, and that can be a difficult thing to push past.
Yeah, especially if you're, delivering bad news or being
Yeah.
assertive. I have a story in the book where it's not a food blogger, obviously, but it's, maybe people can resonate with the situation. It was a woman who was an account manager at a company, and her job was to try to get very wealthy people to invest their money in this firm. It is an investment firm. And when she had to go out and pitch these high net worth clients, she'd have to bring along a portfolio manager. And
Yeah.
this guy, his name is Rick, he was a complete jerk. And he was undermining her pretty much at every point. She would tell Rick before the meeting that, this client really cares about taxes for some reason. And Rick would say, okay, yeah, sounds good. And in the meeting, he would completely blow off the idea of taxes. In fact, undermine her and minimize the importance of taxes. And
Oh
she,
my
like, this
goodness.
is one example, but she was so angry at this guy. And she after a long series of these situations, and she felt at one point, I mean, she just had to confront him, she had to say something, but she was not a very assertive person. Her go-to strategy is to avoid conflict, to smooth it over. And underlying it, when we talked about it, what she said was that she realized that she was afraid he'd hate her, that he would think that she is a jerk, that
Yeah.
he would hate her, when in fact, of course, he's obviously the hateable one. So but it sort of was illogical to her, but she said that honestly was holding her back. And I think that that's an example of the likability.
How crazy is that he was the one undermining her and she was worried about him not
Yep.
liking her?
Yep.
Yeah.
If she was assertive towards him, if she told him off.
Yeah, exactly. And I could think of those scenarios. So like, as an entrepreneur, maybe we're hiring people to develop our websites or things like that. And I've seen stories of people that, get less than stellar results, or, maybe a non-communicative person that they're dealing with. And it's same scenario, worried about hurting that person's feelings or doing something that they, it's really, it's interesting how much we worry about that kind of thing when we shouldn't be.
Yeah, no question. You a lot of us think of ourselves as, people pleasers. We
Yeah.
want to make things good. We don't want to, create conflict. But sometimes you need to stand up for yourself and your needs and your
Yeah.
rights and the needs of your business and so on. And so these are the types of sort of everyday situations, I think that a lot of people struggle with that are outside their comfort zones. But instead of avoiding it, what if you actually learned how to do it and step up
Yes.
and have the courage? And what I find actually is that when you can apply the tools that I talk about in the book to your situation, and you can learn to develop the capacity to actually go off and try these things, you oftentimes, realize, first of all, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And second
Yeah.
of all, I'm actually better at this than I thought I was. So there's a real benefit to actually taking the leap.
Yeah, I love that part too because I do think you provide a lot of not everything has to be this huge monumental change in your life to do something like addressing likability, or if you've got imposter syndrome where you feel like you're not as good as you present to the world. Those are kind of some common forms of resistance. But I like how you kind of share some subtle ways, like you can even just change your language around it, and that can make you can personalize your approach to the change to changing that behavior in a way that feels better to you.
Yeah, I found that it was really interesting across all these like contexts. One really powerful tool was exactly what you just said. People had the ability to sort of customize. You know how like with cooking, you
Yeah,
customize a recipe in a way,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
you might sort of take out an ingredient that you don't really like and substitute it with something that's more comfortable to you, let's say.
Right.
You can do the same thing with your behavior. You can find little subtle small ways of sort of making a situation your own. Like if you have to confront someone, if you have to talk to someone, if you have to deliver bad news, if you whatever it might be, if you're trying to pitch and promote your business, you can kind of find your way of doing it. And I found that that was a super effective tool for people to kind of create some power when originally they felt powerless. So
Yeah.
I talk in the book a lot about the very concrete ways to do that, and kind of like the recipe to do that. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that was really powerful.
Yeah, it's like a recipe that has different options in it too, so that's kind of nice. If you don't like
Exactly.
cilantro, you can add this. Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. It's like,
Uh-huh.
it's like, pick a green. Which green would you like? And you pick your favorite one.
Yes.
Pick a topping.
Yes, exactly. So you even talk about doing power poses, which I love that topic. So, the whole idea is that if you practice standing in a strong power pose before you go into a negotiation, that positivity or that confidence that you create from that will follow you through, and you don't have to actually try to be somebody different. It kind of ekes into you, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do. It's like, don't think you're kind of like a victim in these situations. You actually have quite a bit of power, and you can make it your own, and you can go do it.
Yes, and I also like that you talk about authenticity as it comes to these kinds of things, because I think it's easy when we're stepping outside of those comfort zones to feel a little inauthentic. But in reality, that's just it's a new area and we're building some skill there, and I think that's important to think about too.
Yeah, it's funny, I think for your food bloggers, you're documenting many different things, right? You're blogging about maybe it's restaurants, maybe it's recipes, and so on. But you know what? I would, what a piece of advice I would give people is if as you're learning to reach outside your comfort zone, whether it is negotiating a deal, delivering bad news, pitching your products, whatever it might be, keep a little diary on the side, maybe not online, but on the side. Keep a diary about how hard it is, how challenging it is for you to do these things over time. And I'll bet you that over time, if you look back at your early entries, you'll be surprised at how uncomfortable it was back then and how far you have come right now. But we often don't document these things, and
Yeah.
and so I think it's really critical to kind of give ourselves mile markers to really realize how far we've come. And I think that the ability to do that's actually a nice tool as well.
Oh, that's a great idea. And I kind of think about it from a sports perspective. My husband and I play tennis, and it's like the first time you are practicing an overhead it feels very awkward. In fact, and the more you do it, the better you get. So it seems like that's kind of like the same thought process, right? Writing it down will help you, document and understand where you're making progress.
Yeah, it's a way to feel proud of yourself too. Look,
I
gosh,
know.
look how far I've come. Now I can hit an overhead no problem. But
Yeah.
you probably forget what it was like originally. But then if you look back to your entry under your second day of trying to do it, you like looking back at your former self, that would be very
Yes.
interesting. It
Yes.
might also give you some empathy for your former self.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I like that. And so I think, putting that into the food blogger mentality might be like how many brands did you pitch today to, become a future client and how awkward that felt. I think that's so great to write that idea. I never even thought about that, to write that down and then you can look back in a year and go, wow, now I'm pitching brands left and right and it doesn't feel like a problem at all.
Exactly. And you might not be able to appreciate that sort of small win or that even major win if you don't have the perspective of what it was like earlier. We forget it pretty quickly.
We do. Yes. The mind is clever that way that it causes us to forget those terrible things. But, you talk about procrastination too. And I think that's so important to talk about because, well, I think you say in the book, 95% of us procrastinate at least somewhat. So it's good that we have company.
Yeah, well, we're procrastinating because something's scary. Something is
Yeah.
self-threatening, and we're afraid of
Yeah.
it. And so, I was reading the other day, and I put this in the book too. It's funny. There's some crazy examples of historical procrastination. I think the author of Moby Dick, the book Moby
Yeah.
Dick, Herman Melville. I think
Yeah.
apparently his wife had to chain him to his desk to finish finish the book.
Sometimes I
So
feel
maybe
like I
that's
could use
maybe
that
that's a
too.
strategy for food bloggers. Your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or you know
Yes. Don't get up until you get that post done.
exactly
But you
exactly
also talk about Neil Kennedy, the guy that had something like a platform very similar to Facebook.
yeah yeah right so that was true of a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
People would this guy was perfect. He had this site that was very similar to Facebook, but he was such a perfectionist that he was trying to get it perfect and perfect and perfect and perfect. And by the time that he was ready to launch, multiple other companies had come along, including Facebook, and he had the early lead, but they caught up. And I think that and especially when we're entrepreneurs, a lot of like app developers talk to me about this, about the idea that they would be afraid to put out a beta version of their app when in fact it was critical to do that to figure out the bugs and the problems so they could come out with beta version 2, but they were so afraid to put it out there, right? They would
Yes.
procrastinate and perfect it. And there is a benefit to putting things out there so that you can get feedback on them and then you can iterate. So I maybe that's not exactly applicable to posting on a blog because you do want to have it be professional, but there are probably other aspects of a food blogging life where
Yes.
it's important to get it out there and to get some feedback to sort of make yourself vulnerable.
Do you think that procrastination could it has some ties to I don't know, lack of confidence in yourself?
Um, it could be, yeah, that
Yeah.
procrastination, that maybe a lack, maybe a fear of failure or a fear of
Yes.
exposure and being evaluated. And so,
Yes.
of course, if you're procrastinating, you're delaying the evaluation. And
Yes,
if you have this
exactly.
feeling like that it's going to be awful, then it's a good strategy, right? You're
Yeah.
providing yourself in the moment with relief. The only problem is it
Right.
doesn't get any better if you're waiting.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to put it out there because in fear that somebody will have something bad to say about it. But in reality, that's the thing that helps it get better.
Exactly. Over time, when you think about it, your earliest posts are probably not as good as your current posts,
Yes. But you went ahead and you put it out there and
and you
that's how
had to
you've
get the
gotten improved.
feedback. You
Yes.
wouldn't have gotten the learning if you had waited all this time. You wouldn't have had that learning, and you wouldn't have had that cycle of improvement.
Yes. Oh, I just love that. So I think that's very applicable to what we're doing in food blogging because, a lot of food bloggers are doing things like creating membership sites or they're creating ebooks that they can sell to their readers with cookbooks and things like that. And I think those are great examples of how we can let perfectionism kind of hold us back and, use it as a form of procrastination to really just get it out there and do it.
Yeah, don't let great be the enemy of good.
I love that quote. Yes. But also like the having that confidence in yourself. I feel like there's an undercurrent in your book and that is about finding ways to have more confidence and to, believe in yourself.
Yeah, I think, and I think this kind of goes back to the comfort zone before. Like there's all this conventional wisdom out there. If you Google comfort zones and so on, you'll see pictures
Yeah.
of fish jumping out of fish bowls, and in sayings on the internet, like little memes and pictures saying, life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and if you're not out of your comfort zone, you're not learning anything, and so on. And that certainly could be true, but the problem is that it's not that you just take a leap. you're not afraid of something and then all of a sudden you do it. I think it's more of a process. I think you consider it, you think about it, you might go one step forward, two steps back. Ideally, you'll start to apply the techniques and tools that I talk about in my book that really come from research, but I present in a very user-friendly way. There's a whole strategy. There's courage. There's the story of building confidence. You don't just snap your fingers. And I think sometimes the pictures, well, I guess it's not surprising that pictures on the internet would be misleading, but I'd get discouraged if I use that as my advice.
That's right. So finding a sense of purpose, I think you talk about that in the book, is kind of critical to having more confidence and having more, addressing that comfort zone and getting out of it.
Yeah. So like, if you're afraid to, you're starting a food blogging site and you want to put up that first recipe, or whatever your context is, you want to kind of pitch that first company to potentially sponsor you or something. It could be scary. It could be outside your comfort zone. And what I found across all these people, across all these professions, having this source of conviction, like this wind at your back, this deeper sense of purpose about why am I doing this, to like really step back and reflect on that. Why am I doing this? Why do I care about that? And the answer to that question is very personal. For me, it might be because I want to help other people. If you're,
Right.
I don't know, if you're a gluten-free site and you have a kid who's celiac, is that celiac gluten-free?
Yes.
Am I right? Okay, yeah, sorry. We're stretching my food knowledge here, but yeah, and maybe you deeply care about it. Maybe you've come up with some awesome recipes and some ideas, and that you want to be able to help others, and that's your source of conviction. It's totally different for everyone, but when you have that source of conviction, that's an amazing resource you have to be able to push outside your comfort zone.
I mean, I think that makes so much sense because when the going gets tough, if you don't have that deep passion leading behind you might just kind of go, okay, this is too hard. I don't want to do this anymore.
Exactly. You need to have something. That is going to push you to say yes when every bone in your body is saying no, essentially.
Yeah, I like that. I think, have you heard this quote that culture trumps procedure every time? So like when an organization goes about making change inside the organization, if they don't address the culture first, then no, those changes are never going to actually stick.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, I know that. Yes, I would agree.
I feel like you're saying the same thing right here. I mean, with us, we're more individual, so we're creating our own kind of quote corporate culture. But if we don't have the purpose, then we're, that's we don't have really that kind of organizational culture that's going to bring us through.
That's what you need, because starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur, switching from one job to another, doing a blog, creating a whole little business when it's not something you've never done before, there are going to be lots of things outside your comfort zone, and I think it's essential to know why you're there. Because that gives you, that's like a well you can go to when the going gets tough, so to speak, that you can sort of say, you know what, this is why I'm doing this, right?
Yes. You quote somebody, Harry Emerson, is it Fosdick?
Yep.
Yes. People will work harder for money. They will work harder for other people, but people will work hardest of all when they're dedicated to a cause.
Yeah. I think it's a great quote.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And I also think it's important or interesting that you point out in that very section that women have a tendency to be more assertive when they're negotiating for others.
Yeah, right. So interestingly, yeah. So in that case, having that, orientation. So if you're negotiating it, so practically speaking, women out there, if you're trying to negotiate a deal, don't just think about yourself. Think about your family.
Yes.
Think about something grander than yourself. You'll probably get a better deal.
I see. So in other words, if you're negotiating for yourself, you might just ask for a smaller amount. But when you're thinking about your family or things that really matter, that's really a good idea. I like that. Yeah.
I got to buy my kids shoes. I got to pay for summer camp. I don't know, whatever it is. I got to pay my rent. I got to help support. I got to help pay the bills here. It's not just me. Yes. It's a greater purpose.
Okay, so I feel like we've got a good idea here that we know that there are these comfort zones. We know why we're in those comfort zones. We know that, there's some ways of getting out of those comfort zones. But you talk about the importance of taking leaps. And I found that so inspirational. Why should we take these leaps? It helps us in a lot of ways, huh?
Yeah, so that's what I found across all these contexts, these people, and I also work with people, helping them step outside their comfort zone. And I find that the most critical thing is to actually take that leap. That's what all the stuff in the book is oriented towards, to try to get you to actually do it, as opposed to avoid, as opposed to succumb to your fear. Because if you can take a leap, what I find is people essentially discover two things. Most people do. Number one, this isn't as hard as I thought it was, right? On the other side of fear, on the other side of worry, what you find out is it's not actually as hard as you thought it was. And number two, you oftentimes find out that you're better at it than you thought you were. And those are very powerful if you think about it, because those two thoughts, in essence, can sort of push you forward to try it again, right? Try it to pitch that next company, try to put up that next post or whatever. And then that's the process of starting to develop sea legs, starting to develop confidence.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have a story. When I was in grad school, we did a team building session, and we took us out on this course, and there was like this big long teepee. It was probably 2 or 3 stories high, and we had to climb it. We had rappel belts on, and I got about like 2/3 of the way up, and I was just hugging the pole in fear. I was so afraid, and the coach was down at the bottom, and he yelled up, "Marley, you can reach further than you think you can." And I actually did. I mean, this notch that I had to step on was so high. I didn't think I was going to get to it, but I did it. And the feeling of reaching the top of that the top part of that I had to reach. Oh my God, it was such a high when I got there. So I feel like, to me, that's like a physical example of how taking that leap can just really make a big impact on yourself.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Are there things that we can do to practice that? I mean, in other words, if a big leap is to do something during a negotiation and that feels like a huge thing, is there something that you can do, like some mini leaps that can help practice for that?
Yeah, I find that that's a key thing, actually, to find, context. And I'm not sure what they would be for food bloggers, but for instance, think in sports. If anyone out there likes sports, instead of going right to the major leagues, you practice in the minor leagues. Or if something that you had to do in a company was a major layoff, delivering bad news, might be good to practice delivering bad news maybe in performance reviews, and get used to delivering bad news before it has to be the ultimate situation. So if you can find like naturally occurring training grounds, or let's say you have to deliver a big speech, well, maybe you actually can prepare by speaking in front of a few friends and colleagues and build your way up. Whatever it is, I think it's really important to go in smaller steps, to build the confidence, build the courage, build the skill set that you then can carry forward. So, it's very personal. Where in your life might you have potential training grounds, really? That would be the question to ask
I would
yourself.
think even in parenting, you have to deliver bad news sometimes. So maybe there's some areas where you're already doing it that you can apply in other areas.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Or, I mean, very concretely, I don't know, in food blogging, let's say you really want to pitch your site to, I don't know what a company would be, but a really appealing company. But you've got like 4 or 5. Start with the one that's sort of the least appealing, to practice your pitch and what it's like and so on. And then you can work your way up to the one that you really want.
Ah, that's a great idea. I think you also talk in there about journaling afterwards. I think that's so brilliant. I journal every day. I never thought about journaling about an experience that I had, and what went well, what didn't go well. I think that's such a great idea.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there are two purposes of it. One purpose is that there's research that says that it's a great way actually of coping. If you're feeling uncomfortable about something, to actually write it down is a very soothing experience. But even beyond that, it's a great history of your experience over time stepping outside your comfort zone. I think we talked earlier about the idea that you're often surprised when you look back at it and you said, "Really, that's how I felt." I'm surprised.
Exactly.
I'm so good at pinching companies now. I feel so confident pressing send on a note or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It feels to me like also that journaling should kind of give ourselves it's easy to be hard on yourself as a solo business person. And so if you could take the opportunity in your journaling to soften that stance a little bit and give yourself credit for just trying, even when you mess up.
Yeah, treat yourself like you'd treat your best friend.
Yeah. Yes. Or, I heard somebody else say, would you want to work for yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I'm sure you've seen this. You've worked with a lot of corporations, and some corporations can be very toxic. I think that's actually why a lot of people end up quitting their jobs and becoming entrepreneurs, right? Is because they don't like, the work environments of some companies.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes critical now that you have the power to actually
Yes.
craft
Yeah.
your world in a way you want it to be.
Yeah, don't carry those toxic energies along for the ride, right? Like make sure your own business is something that you enjoy being at.
Exactly.
Yeah, how often do we do that? So, is there any other, thoughts that you'd like to share? We wouldn't talk on based on the book and what people can expect from it.
I just really encourage people to check it out.
Yeah,
It's a as you know, it's a very user friendly book, and my
yeah,
goal is to take a topic that so many people talk about, but no one I feel is really nailed down in terms of giving people very concrete tools and strategies and things that are actually like immediately applicable. My goal with the book is that you can read it, you can pick it up, you can finish it, and immediately apply it to your life.
yes. And I think there's so much that we can all benefit from about feeling more confident in our reach. Whether that's a lot of times we talk about reach as a food blogger, as the audience and the size of the reach that we have. And I think this applies to that, but also just to us personally and how we show up professionally. I just think that's all so important. So it's a great book.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I have a couple of fun questions I like to ask people at the end of the interview. Are you game?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's one food item you can't live without?
One food item, well, that's easy. Well, it's
Okay.
a drink. Is
Okay.
coffee qualify or?
Yes, it sure does.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Do you drink it black? How do you drink your coffee?
Well, it's a very good question. I change all the time.
Oh,
Nowadays, I actually cold brew my coffee.
oh, okay.
So I take grounds,
Yeah.
I coarsely ground them, and then I steep them in water for about 24 hours, and then it's awesome. So I'm a cold brew guy.
But then do you heat it up before you drink it?
No, I drink it cold with like
Okay.
a little bit of cream and milk and sugar, and
Yeah.
I have some right here actually.
That's why you sound so perky, right?
There you go. Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of health benefits to coffee.
Sure. Well, good. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the favorite app on your phone?
Ooh, favorite app on my phone. Good question. I guess the fun one these days is Snapchat.
Ah, yeah.
My well, I have a 12-year-old daughter,
Okay.
and she Snapchats all the time. So I realized I had to get into it, and it's really fun with all these filters, and you can do these crazy messages. And
Yes, they are fun.
I'm probably like I'm very old compared to the Snapchat demographic, but I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah. Do you use it for your business or just mostly to communicate with your
Oh,
daughter?
definitely not. No, I use Twitter, and Twitter, and I'd encourage people to check me out on Twitter, and in LinkedIn and Facebook. I have a public author Facebook site and so on, and I do all that social media. But Snapchat's, you asked for a fun app. That's my fun app.
Okay, got you. Okay, so do you have any time for TV? And if you do, what's your favorite show?
Oh, I watch a lot of TV. Yes.
Okay.
My favorite show. I have a lot of favorite shows. Actually, I would have to say that right now we're really enjoying Top Chef, actually,
Really?
because
Okay.
because it's a family show. It's something now that my kids are of like 10
Uh,
and 12. We're trying to find shows that we can all watch, and so
it's not easy.
everyone's into it,
Yeah.
and so we've been watching it pretty closely. It's in South Carolina right now.
Oh, that's great. Any other non-food shows that you love?
Non-food shows. Well, I'm a big sports fan, so I watch a lot
Okay.
of sports.
What's your favorite
I
sport?
My favorite sport to watch is,
Yeah.
I would have to say, football, and I know I'm probably going to anger some people out there, but I'm a huge Patriots fan. I'm from New England. I'm born and raised in Boston, so I'm a huge sports fan. I don't know. I like a lot of TV shows. I'm very eclectic. I like everything from Pawn Stars and Deadliest Catch to Masterpiece Theater, What Not to Wear, Brooklyn 99, Speechless, Blackish. Yeah, I watch a lot of TV.
Yeah, that is a wide range of shows right there.
Plus all these reality shows. I'm very. I mean, I'm pretty eclectic.
Yeah, that is. I'm surprised. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned it already, but can you just tell people how they can find you online?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's my maybe I don't know if you have show notes, but
Yep.
it's my www.andymolinsky.com. The book is called Reach. It's with Penguin Random House, and I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and I encourage you to connect, and I really encourage you to check out the book.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Andy. I had a really great time talking with you today.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks to Andy Molinsky for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to go to choppedpodcast.com to learn more about today's show. Thanks so much for your feedback about the podcast. I love getting your emails. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Just knowing that you're appreciating and loving the show just makes the work that goes into every episode so much more worth it. I really mean that. As you might have gathered by now, I am really passionate about helping you be your best. I'd love it if you could share this episode with friends and head over to iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. It helps the show so much. You inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Now go forth and be your best you.